You're listening to the No Bullshit Vegan Podcast, episode 157. Sheep farmer turned vegan JH Burnett speaks with me today about his experiences in animal agriculture, his vegan story, and more.
Welcome to the No Bullshit Vegan Podcast. Myth-busting and evidence-based advice to help you kick butt with your health and fitness on a vegan diet. Here's your host, Karina Inkster.
Hey, welcome to the show. I'm Karina, your go-to no BS vegan fitness and nutrition coach. If you want two of your very own vegan fitness and nutrition coaches who are deathly allergic to 30-day quick fixes and instead will work with you to create lifelong habits so you can still be kicking ass when you're 94, we are your team. Check out our coaching options at karinainkster.com/coaching. Introducing today's guest, JH Burnett. JH is a former sheep farmer and breeder in the dairy industry who, after the atrocities he witnessed in these industries, turned vegan and an animal rights activist. He's written a memoir, Ex-Farmer Goes Vegan, offers vegan-inspired coaching programs, and along with his wife, Elle, co-creates a variety of vegan children's books. And his favorite meal is lasagna. Now, this is one of the most raw stories that's been aired on the podcast thus far, so I'm really grateful to JH for sharing his story. Here's our conversation. Hi, JH. Great to have you on the show today. Thanks for joining me.
Hey, Karina. Thank you so much, man. Long-time listener. It's very nice to be in there. Thank you for having me.
Well, thanks for tuning into the show. It's always great to have someone on the show who has been listening, so that's very cool. Let's start, normally I start asking someone about their vegan story, but we're tying that into our conversation related to what you used to do and what you're doing now. So what I would like to ask instead is, you're in South Africa. Maybe you can tell our listeners a little bit about what the vegan scene is like there, what you've noticed. Like, what's it like being a vegan in your area of the world? Because it's very different, I would think, based on where a lot of our listeners are.
Yeah, I can imagine. Yeah, so the vegan scene is picking up, but it is fairly small compared to most first world countries, if I can call them so. We used to joke around here saying that we are like 5 years behind most first world countries, right? And I think the same is sort of true for the vegan scene. We're getting there. You have various organizations only now rising up, and some very nice local vegan communities. The restaurants are, the menus are full of vegan options, so we are getting there, but we still have a very long way to go. A couple of festivals going on, so give us hopefully not another 5 years, but another 5 months or so. We will catch on. Just give us a little bit more time, I guess.
Fair enough. Well, you're doing a lot of the work here in the vegan scene, so it's good to have you doing the work that you do, which we're going to discuss, of course. But I think, there's a lot of areas of the world, including areas of Canada, where I am, that feel very behind and that need a lot of work still. So we all have work to do, but we're doing it, which is part of the whole point of our conversation today. So you have a very interesting past and a very interesting transformation, if that's okay to call it that happened. You worked in the meat and dairy industry.
I love the word transformation, yeah.
Yeah. Transformation is, it's used a lot in the fitness world, and I think in that sense I'm not totally into it, but in the sense of someone who makes a change based on ethical values, I think it could be applicable. I think it can be used. It can be helpful. So you have a past of being in the meat and dairy industry, and now you're vegan. What the hell happened?
Can you believe it? Yeah. And now I'm vegan. Where to begin? I guess I have to take you back. I grew up in a smallish town down in the Western Cape of South Africa, right? And I grew up on a farm, a lovely place, the stereotypical family farm where everybody knows each other's business. All of our family members are working on the farm. Mom, dad, grandparents, siblings, their partners. and I wanted nothing to do with it, right? So after school, I moved away, and then in 2012, after a couple of family hiccups, I was asked to move there to the farm and to take it over. Everybody had left. It was only me, and my dad was semi-involved, so I ran the farm for about 6 years, and this was a fairly vegan-friendly sort of place because we farmed with olives. This is not the sheep farm where I ended up later in life. So I found this olive farm, and then I met my wife, got married on the farm, and but it was a difficult journey on this olive farm. A lot of employees, about 100 of them, and a lot of HR problems, a lot of financial difficulties, importing, exporting various products. And we used to, my wife and I would say we would escape to the Great Karoo. Picture like a semi-desert sort of place in the heart of South Africa. And this is where my grandparents farmed with sheep in a small town called Kalfinia, which is very rural. It's actually 40 k's gravel road from the nearest small town, right? So it's in the middle of nowhere. So my wife and I would go there on holidays to just get a break from this olive farm and the factory and all the problems and the financial pressures of it all. And just, I guess, spending some time there on this family farm in the Great Karoo. It was a special place for us. And what made it even more special is that this farm in Kalfinia is the oldest family-owned farm in South Africa. So there's a lot of sentiment attached to it. So we used to tell one another, imagine waking up here every morning. I mean, there's space aplenty. Your nearest neighbors are like 20 k's down the road. You've got nothing but space and time. So it was sort of a dream for us to take over this farm one day. And we never actually thought it would happen. But then in 2018, the olive farm was sold off. It was in the beginning of 2018. I was 29 years old at the time, and had no idea what I was going to do with the rest of my life. And then the call came in asking, JH, would you and Elle, this is my wife, would you and Elle be interested in moving to Kalfinia and to take over this family farm? And man, I was so excited. We leaped at the opportunity. We just so desperately wanted to be a part of this history, so to speak. We wanted to be a part of that story, I guess. To us, it was a very romantic idea. Obviously, we knew we were going to be farming with sheep, but we had no problem with that at the time because we were full-on meat eaters. So that's how we ended up going to the farm initially. That's how I ended up in the sheep/meat industry to begin with.
Got it. Okay, interesting. So you were meat eating at the time. You had this dream, this amazing opportunity that appeared. You presumably moved there. You started farming. So what happens next?
So my wife actually stayed behind in the town where we from originally in Worcester because she had a business in town and she couldn't just pack up, and I basically left immediately. I was so excited, right? But she needed a couple of months to sort of transition out of that business and to give her clients some decent, just some space and time to find someone else to help them because she's a Pilates instructor, something you could probably relate to quite well. So she just, anyway, gave them some time, 4 months. So the first 4 months of that journey, I was alone on the farm with my grandparents, and me and my 2 bull terriers, the 2 dogs, the English bull terriers with the long noses. Mm-hmm. So the 3 of us moved there, and then as of the first day, I just realized that something isn't right. Looking back now, I call it the vegan connection. I started making the vegan connection, and I actually made a couple of them. Looking back now, there were a couple of them, various instances that I made this vegan love connection where the light just went on in my head, where I made that connection, realizing what we're doing to these poor animals. And the first one, I made it on literally the first morning on the job, so to speak, because we went out to dog sheep. Now, I had no idea what that meant at the time, but that's basically the cutting off of the tails of the small lambs. And even just seeing that, just experiencing that, because I was sort of the silent observer, standing to the side, and I was quickly made to be almost silenced, I guess. I could see the shock in these guys' eyes, the guys who worked on the farm, because, farming sheep is almost like in their blood, as they would put it, right? So they know the way of the land, and knowing that I didn't, they quickly silenced me and just explained, no, this is the way we do it, this is the way we've always done it. But basically what they were doing is they were taking old rustic garden scissors and just cutting off these sheep's tails without the use of any anesthetics. And so it really bothered me, and I was walking with it the entire day. It just didn't sit right to my heart, right? And that evening I drove out to the field where the sheep were sleeping just to check up on these lambs, because I just had an odd feeling about the whole thing. And arriving there in the field, there were these 2 lambs that were so weak they could hardly stand up, and they were bleeding profusely, right? And the rest of the herd had already sort of given up on them. They had already wandered off for the night, leaving these 2 baby lambs to basically bleed out and die by themselves. And geez, man, my heart just broke. So I picked up these 2 lambs and I drove them home, and I took them with me in the house. And I made a nice bed for them on the kitchen floor, put down blankets, treated their wounds to the best of my abilities, and fed them nice lamb baby formula milk, and just sitting there loving on them, looking into their eyes. I could, there was a connection there. I realized in that moment that these are sentient beings, that they are capable of feeling love and affection and the fear, and they were so scared, man. They were looking at me, almost begging me to help them, and I really did. And sitting there with them, I really tried. And my 2 bull terriers, the 2 dogs, are literally next door in the bedroom. And I'm thinking to myself, and I realized there's another vegan connection, another vegan moment, realizing like I love these 2 dogs with all my heart. It feels like I can lay my life down for them. I mean, they've been with us through thick and thin. But yeah, these 2 lambs, what is the difference? They are all sentient beings, They don't want to die. They just want to live their lives in peace and harmony. And so there was another connection right there in that moment, sitting with them for several hours. Eventually went to bed, woke up the next morning, and they had passed away in the night, right? So they had lost too much blood, and unfortunately I couldn't save them. And my heart was just broken. This is now my 2nd morning on the farm. My heart is broken, and I'm walking out with these 2 lambs, and I'm laying them down by the feet of the guys working on the farm, and they asked me, what happened here? And I sort of explained to them this moment that I had, and I asked one of them, would you please bury them, right? And I was sort of wiping away the tears, and about 15 minutes later or so, I saw him just toss them on the garbage dump, right? And it just broke my heart, and I rushed there, and the wildcats had already sort of started eating away at them, and I just took them, and I just couldn't do it, man, and I buried them. And that's sort of how my plant-based vegan journey started. I didn't move to the farm with any vegan foundation. At that time, I was 29 years old. I had no vegan foundation. I'd never met another vegan. I'd never seen a vegan documentary, read an article, no, nothing. I literally had to learn on the job, so to speak.
Wow, that's pretty powerful. I am very impressed at your quick vegan connections there, honestly. I mean, sometimes that's what it takes for folks, is to have pets like your 2 dogs and make that connection to all sentient beings. I mean, most folks who go vegan don't have a first-hand experience of having 2 lambs die on them. I have to say, that's pretty intense. And I think that would change anyone if they had that experience. So that's pretty powerful. So how did that then change your thinking? Like what happened next in the story of JH's veganism?
So I phoned my wife sitting with the two lambs there in the kitchen, right? And her heart just broke. She was weeping and she said, "Oh, I'm going to leave this Pilates business immediately. I'm coming. I want to take care of them." So she also made that vegan connection, right? But in truth, I didn't stop eating meat right away. I remember I stopped buying meat, right? And so too did my wife. But whenever we visited friends or family, we would still have some meat at their place, right? But it never felt right. It took another 3 months or so for us to turn fully plant-based. But I couldn't, at the time, we couldn't call ourselves vegans because now we were in a position we got paid off of the backs of these innocent animals. We were getting paid by the meat industry. So we would just say, no, we're plant-based, we don't eat meat, but we never call ourselves vegan because obviously, as you know, I mean, veganism is so much more than a mere diet. It really is a lifestyle, a change of heart. So yeah, we didn't call ourselves vegan. So we just sort of lived on the farm. We didn't want to leave it behind. We really wanted to be the change, make the change. Something shifted in our heart. We immediately started taking in poor, suffering animals from the region, and my wife and I started a very unofficial, small little sanctuary at the back of our house. So we couldn't save the sheep, right, the entire herd, because on paper, ridiculous as it may sound, they didn't belong to us. I'm saying ridiculous because, I mean, how can a sentient being really, truly belong to anybody? But on paper, they belong to people, and we were only there to basically govern the farm. I couldn't save them, but what I could do is I could save these fowl, for example. And we took in a couple of sheep from neighbors, and we started taking care of these animals at the back of our house. And then what followed was actually like 2.5 years of just witnessing the blood, the gore, and the suffering of it all. But never once, we didn't want to move away, although we got a couple of opportunities to do so. But we made the call that we're going to be the change. We wanted to transform it into a vegan sanctuary. And there were certain arrangements in place that would see us take over the farm in 2025. So our thinking was, we got to stick it out. Fortunately, this farm also had a pecan division, and I basically turned all of my attention to that. This was in dire straits, the irrigation systems and so forth. So I immediately put up my hand and said, "Listen, man, I'll take care of it. I don't need any help. I'll do it," because that sort of allowed me the opportunity to move ever further away from the blood and the gore of the meat industry. Although I wasn't spared, I mean, I still witnessed the brutality of it all, the slaughter, the poisoning of the wild animals, like the caracals in the mountains, for example. They would take giblets of meat and put poison in there, so that the jackal would rather, get poisoned than catch the small lambs and stuff. So those sort of things really broke one's heart. But just continued on that journey and build a model around a vegan sanctuary, and took it to some financial experts in the area to really create a self-sustainable vegan sanctuary as of 2025 onwards. That was the dream, what we were working towards.
Interesting. So I feel like things are now kind of different from that original plan. I think you were in the dairy industry at some point as well. And now what you do is completely different. So what happened there?
What ended up happening is that dream, was sort of taken away from us, right? Because there were some family disputes. As I said, the farm had been in the family's bloodline for like 250 years at the time. This was now right at the advent of COVID. And everybody wanted a piece of it, right? Everyone was struggling for their percentage of ownership of this farm, the sentiment of it all. And by the advent of COVID, they turned to the courts, right? The shareholders, and they said, no, okay, they're going to have to fight this out in court. And then the call was made from the powers to be that it would be best to rent it out and to have all the family members, which basically at the time, me and my wife and my grandparents, rather leave the farm until it's settled in court. And then we can always return, right? So we were sort of stuck in a very unfortunate position at the end of 2020, because that was what kept us sane, the dream of turning it into a sanctuary, right? Experiencing the blood and the gore and seeing it and having to take sheep off to slaughter. I mean, that really does kill you if you don't eat meat, right? You are plant-based for the animals. And the only thing keeping you sane is that, no, JH, you can do it, my man. You are going to be the change. You are turning it into a sanctuary. It's just going to take 2-3 more years. You are going to get there eventually, right? And then, unfortunately, as I said, that was taken away from us, and we were in a position we had to find other homes for our very unofficial little sanctuary at the back of our house. And even just thinking about that now really does break one. But at the end of, to the latter part of 2020, we were again in a sort of position as, what are you now going to do with your life? And then I was chatting to an old friend of mine on Facebook, and he had no idea of our situation back in South Africa because he had been living in the States for quite a while. And he said, JH, would you ever consider coming over to the States? Because he was helping a local farmer recruit some individuals from South Africa to go work in North Dakota. I said, well, connect me with the farmer, which he then did. And one thing led to another. The farmer took interest in me and were liking to me. And he said, JH, I really need you to come over because I come from a strong managerial background. So this guy just said, listen, I've got some management issues on the farm here where I'm at. I need you to come in and intervene between me and the guys working for me. You look like the right guy for the job. And I obviously very against animal farming, and I think he knew it at the time. So I specifically asked him about it, if they've got any, livestock, for example. And he said, I remember him laughing, saying, not unless you count the dog. So I went there thinking, okay, this is a good way just to sort of survive this terrible COVID situation. This was also at a time where most international borders were closed, but the US allowed certain individuals to come in if they had something to do with agriculture, which I then did, moved to North Dakota. When I arrived on the farm in North Dakota, lo and behold, there was an enormous feedlot housing more than 2,000 dairy cows. Talk about a shock. This place made the farm in a Great Karoo look like a paradise. If ever there wasn't hell, it's your local feedlot. You can take my word for it. If you don't believe me, just drive down there and have a look for yourself. Arriving there, seeing those poor innocent beings standing literally knee-deep in their own dung. Can you imagine? It was an absolute shock. I'll never forget, on my first Sunday there, I was given the afternoon off. And while spending a couple of days in the area, I had noticed that there were several deceased cows lying in the pens, being trampled to semi-mince, basically. I know it's harsh to put it this way, but that was the truth, right? So I asked the farmer if he'll mind if I can at least take him out, because I asked the guy in charge, listen, what on earth is going on here? When are you removing these dead cows? And I was told in so many words, I won't swear in your podcast, but basically, we're not taking them out. They can basically effing trample one another into the mud. Man.
Wow, that's brutal.
Yeah, it's the stuff of nightmares, and I mean it literally, brutal, yeah. So I took him out that Sunday afternoon. I took out, in my book I took out 22 because I was asked to go back to the grave site of these cows and to go take photos of them, and I took 22 photos, and they had severed limbs. And their skulls had been crushed, and it was just brutal. That's sort of how I started, man, in the dairy industry, not knowing that I was almost lured into it. Tricked is perhaps a harsh word, but definitely that's the way it still feels to this day.
Right. Yeah. I mean, there was only so much you can do about asking questions and making sure you know what you're getting into. And maybe not a serious answer from the farmer who probably knew where you were coming from and had an idea, how you would respond. So that's pretty brutal having to witness things like that. And especially when you weren't expecting them, when this was something that you feel wasn't what you signed up for. That's really rough. Are you vegan at this point? Like at this point, after you've moved to the States, have you made some kind of decision about veganism, or does that come later?
So I had gone vegan, meaning plant-based, in 2018. This is now 2 years prior to this. So I wasn't eating meat at the time for the animals, all right, wanting nothing more than to build a sanctuary where animals can be saved, loved, and cared for. So I was technically vegan, although I never called myself vegan because I was still paid in the sheep industry and now getting paid in the dairy industry of all things. So what happened there on this farm, this feedlot, I was working another job, right? I was working on a tractor, so I wasn't involved with the feedlot until I think 2 weeks into my time there, when the farmer called me over and said, listen, the guy running the feedlot, he's been doing it for 15 odd years. However, I had just found out that apparently he's planning on dropping me after 15 years. He's going to go on holiday and he's not going to return. The farmer said, I heard this via the grapevine, and I'm not going to let him catch me. I'm going to make the first move. So JH, you are here. I trust you. I like you. What I'm going to do is I'm going to basically kick that guy to the curb, and you are now going to run the feedlot. And I'm like, no, you do not understand.
Wow.
I am completely against what's happening here. I cannot do it. I remember specifically saying I will not do it. And I was basically told my way or the highway. Then you're more than welcome to leave, keeping in mind that the nearest airport is 3 hours drive from where I was at, without a car, in the snow. A poor old South African. I literally mean poor, because we had lost all. I don't want any credit for it, but we had given up a lot trying to find new homes for the animals we cared for, and paying people to take care of them, and buying feed like a year's feed in advance. And so if I didn't earn a salary at the end of that month, we were basically checkmate, right? There shouldn't have been any excuses, and I'm so ashamed to say it, but after giving it some thought, and I think crying myself to sleep that night, I ended up going back, and I said, okay, fine, this is what I need to do in order to survive, basically, in order to put a roof over our head and food on the table. I'll do it. And the worst part of it is that most of those cows were artificially inseminated on a daily, well, obviously not on a daily basis. Artificial insemination took place on a daily basis, but obviously cows only get, in the dairy industry, inseminated like once a month. But anyway, so I was, again, forced is a harsh word, but I then made the choice, believing that I had little others to make. I made the choice to see it through, and I ended up working in that feedlot for like 3.5 months, breeding cows, up to 50 cows per day. And that just broke me, man. I was already so depressed. I was already so depressed by the atrocities witnessed in the meat industry. Now, the atrocities in the dairy industry just completely pushed me over the edge. It was so dark within me, and seeing those cows exploited and suffering, and knowing that although my heart is for them, I am now a part of the problem. Not only am I a part of the problem, I am the problem. So there I was in North Dakota, emotionally and mentally an absolute mess, exploiting animals to stay alive. Yeah, an absolute horrendous time of my life, just thinking back on it now.
Yeah, I can only imagine. It's making me think that there are probably more folks than we think in similar positions who feel like they have no other choices, maybe they don't actually have other choices, or who are just trying to put a roof over their heads and are part of this system, the systemic torture system, essentially, of sentient beings. I don't want to minimize your experience, of course, because I know that it was extremely difficult, to say the least. But I do think that there are a lot of folks in this same position who work in the meat industry or who work in the dairy industry and who maybe feel like they want other options. It's just, I don't know, something random I'm considering, I guess.
It's true. I really do. I buy into what you're saying. I think it's true. I think there are countless individuals stuck in the meat and dairy industry who don't want to be there. Trust me, you don't want to be there. I can't think of one individual that would want to be there. But because they don't have, in their minds at least, any other options available, staying is the safer option. Crazy. After 3.5 months, I couldn't do it because I was on the verge of committing suicide. I just couldn't do it. My heart was for the animals, and I would rather die of starvation than continue the exploitation. So I just couldn't do it. I had I always want to say a supernatural intervention happened to me one evening while I was sitting down at a creek. Now it's North Dakota in the winter. It's minus 38 degrees Celsius. You being from Canada, you're probably used to that cold. Me as South African,
not that cold.
It broke my brain. I couldn't, it was so cold. Anyway, but I was sitting in the dark of night by this creek, right? And I was so depressed just by the atrocities, witness and being part of the problem. And I'm sitting there with a rustic old blade, just sort of cutting away at my wrist. And I'm literally talking to myself and saying, man, I can just end it now. I've got nothing left to live for. This is just killing me. And at that moment, an enormous elk. Now, I'd never seen an elk before, right? Only in Christmas tales on TV. But an enormous elk came walking down the slope towards the creek, and it had these enormous antlers. And I was sitting there, and I couldn't believe it's coming straight at me. Surely it must be able to, if it can't see me, surely it must be able to smell me, right? So at least so I thought. And I'm sitting there almost fearful because what's going to happen if he does see me, right? The next moment, I see that he had been injured. He had been shot, and in the face of all places, he had been shot in the bottom lower jaw, right? And his entire lower jaw was dangling by the side of his face like a wet cloth.
Oh no!
Again, that alone, it just absolutely broke me. I couldn't believe. Here I was sitting looking at what my species, if I can call us, that we did this to him, another human. How cruel. And this elk was so desperate for water that he was willing to approach me to try to get some from the creek whilst his jaw is dangling almost in the wind, so to speak. And I was backing away slowly, sitting there, can't believe it. And he ended up walking away in the snow, and I followed him that night. And it was quite easy to do so because obviously he was losing a lot of blood, red blood on white snow. So it was quite easy to follow him. And I was following him with the torch on my cell phone. And I was just walking there, and I'm just sobbing, and I'm just saying, this can't be. Is there nothing that I can do? And I realized in that moment, man, I've got to change, man. I got to leave. I've got to leave it all behind. I've got to get out of these horrific industries, and I've got to dedicate my life to the cause of animal liberation. It's not too late for me. I can still turn it around. And so I did. I followed him all through the night. I didn't find, because surely he was about to die. He wouldn't survive. I knew it. But I lost his track eventually, ended up going home, resigned the next morning, never returned back to work, came home to South Africa, just started changing my life around to where we're at now, where we consider ourselves, full-time animal lovers, vegan activists, and just living, I guess, on the right side of history, because I really do believe that being vegan is on the right side of history.
Wow, how powerful is that? That is incredible. That moment of realizing, well, actually, I do have agency and I can change and I can do something different, even though that must have been extremely challenging, to say the least. So you went back home and did what? Set up a business, started coaching, started writing books. What did you do?
All of the above. First of all, I just want to say, you pointed out now that you don't want to diminish my experience in the industry. And I just want to say, from my perspective at least, it really ain't about me. The little that I endured, although it was tough, it is nothing compared to the poor animals. Leaving them behind, although I was so grateful to leave, but leaving them behind, my goodness. I remember on the morning that I left, I went to them because, they are such gentle creatures. They are such gentle, intelligent creatures, those cows. Man, and I went there and I played soccer with them for one last time, because I used to do so every morning before I go to work. Before the atrocities of the day would start, I would go to them, like half an hour before the day start, and I'll just kick a ball around with them. And if you've ever seen joy, it's a bunch of cows chasing a soccer ball. It is brilliant, right? So the morning that I left, man, I was playing soccer with them one last time, and I'm weeping. I'm thinking, I get to leave. I get to go live my life. I get to be free, but they are caught in this horrific industry. There is no escape. There's only pain and torture and exploitation awaiting them. But I was digressing. To answer your question, I returned to South Africa. I set up a small coaching business. It was in COVID, helping mainly vegan clients who wanted to shine their light in this dark reality called life. And that served us quite well for a time. In that time, I also took the time to write my vegan memoir called, you guessed it, Ex-Farmer Goes Vegan. I tried to make the title as simple and self-explanatory as possible. And it was, I found it quite tough writing it. So I took a lot of breaks, and in order to stay sane through it all, I wrote various vegan-inspired children's books, right? Because it's lighter, it's portraying veganism in a very gentle light, which it is. But I mean, through the eyes of a child, it's obviously it's almost a gentler way of writing than having to experience all the atrocities that we're talking about now. So that's how I ended up writing various children's books. And my wife also took the time. She's a very artistic individual. She also took the time to illustrate all of these books. So finally I finished. We knew we were going to start a full-on vegan activism process or organization of some kind. But we were waiting for me to finish writing this book, and it took forever because I found it so immensely heart-wrenching to write about these things. But I finally did, and now we're running a website called veganismhaswon.com. Many people ask me why veganism has won, because it has won in my life, and it is one in your life, and it is winning in the individual animals who are getting rescued due to the vegan choices that we make. Veganism is winning each and every day. One only needs to look at the individual life. So it's called Veganism as One. It has sort of taken on a life of its own. It is where we sell various books from this website, and I still do a lot of coaching to clients. I'm fortunate, to be helping clients from all over the world. Very fortunate to be doing so. Some speaking engagements, some podcasts with lovely individuals such as yourself, and some very exciting vegan collaborations happening with very cool vegan influencers. So that's sort of what we're doing at the moment.
Wow, what a transformation. There's that word again, transformation. And what a powerful story too. So the coaching, I'm interested in the coaching that you're doing. So what are your clients working on? Are they already vegan and they want someone who gets it? Are they interested in veganism and they're currently making the transition? What's the coaching like?
So both, but mostly the former, people who are already vegan and having a tough time of it. For example, let's say, for example, I'm vegan, but I'm getting a tough time at work. I don't know how to navigate my way through it. Or my spouse isn't vegan. I'm getting made fun of. It's just, I'm sort of depressed about the whole thing. It's just a safe space to get life coaching, but from a vegan who can easier relate to, I guess, the suffering that you're going through. And then obviously also get clients who want to enter the vegan space but don't really know how to go about it. So you do get both, but mostly the former.
Wow, that is interesting. I'm feeling like this could be a good resource for some of our clients because we don't do what we call life coaching. We do lifestyle coaching and fitness and nutrition and things like this. But, when it comes to living in a household that's not completely vegan or having a spouse who doesn't get it or any number of social situations like the work environment that you just put up as an example, those are things we can have discussions around with our clients, obviously, but I feel like it would be interesting to actually have a connection with a coach who specializes in these things and who is vegan, of course, but who approaches it more from a life coaching perspective. So that's really interesting. What amazing work you must be doing with folks from all over the world.
That is my heart, to approach it from a life coaching perspective, to help you basically shine your own light. I can only help you to almost help yourself. The light is already within you, and how can you best shine it? How can you best light up the darkness? Because let's face it, there's a lot of suffering out there. Just for any vegan to stay sane in this world of all, being surrounded by the reality of a non-vegan world, it's a harsh reality. So yeah, that's my heart, and I'm so grateful to be doing it on a daily basis. Yeah.
That's amazing. Hey, one more thing I wanted to run by you is something that came up for me when you mentioned veganism has won. Of course, I've looked at your website already, but something that I was just thinking randomly was that name by itself makes it seem like veganism is a fight, or it's something that you need to, go head to head on with someone else, which is an interesting perspective because I feel like a lot of us can relate to that, in a way. Maybe we don't want it to be a fight. One day we want the entire world to be vegan. Of course we do, because we're ethical vegans. But is that part of your thinking there? Like, do you feel like we have something to prove, or we have something to go up against, or we have a fight to engage in?
I'll never back away from the fight, although it is in my heart to do so. I don't want to fight. I want to approach it from the perspective of just speaking and living my truth to the fullest. And naming the website Veganism Has Won was a massive risk, right? Because it can be interpreted in the wrong way, but it was a chance that we took, a risk that we took, and we're happy that we did it because we really want to celebrate the victories in the individual life, not the fight that's going on between vegans and non-vegans, although that will most likely never end. But we'll much rather just explore and celebrate and encourage the individual victories in the individual lives. And I think the best way to impact a non-vegan society is by living a very happy, very joyful existence in clear view of all non-vegans, showing that, yes, man, I am healthy and I get to live a grateful, happy existence as an ethical vegan. I just, from my perspective, and many will differ with me, but from my perspective, is the best way to go about it, because I have such great conversations with non-vegans, and they are drawn to the positive message more so than they will be convinced by condemnation, so to speak.
I fully agree. And I know that there are different approaches, and different approaches are needed in the vegan movement for sure.
Of course.
Because we never know which one is going to resonate with a certain individual. But I'm on board with the positive approach and looking at the benefits and looking at the ethical piece and living our lives as we do as vegans, as you said, in plain sight of those who aren't. I think that's absolutely brilliant. It was amazing speaking with you, JH. I'm really appreciative of you sharing your story. Probably one of the more intense and raw background stories that we've shared on the podcast. So very grateful to you for sharing that with us. And if there's anything you'd like to leave our listeners with, I will let you go.
Thank you so much for having me. I really do appreciate it. And to all your listeners, thank you for having me. Please be encouraged. If you are ethical vegan, you are on the right side of history. Be encouraged. Reach out to me. Would love to hear from you. You don't have to be a client. You can just pop in with an email and share your brilliant vegan story. Would love to hear from you. Thank you so much for having me. Be blessed. Until we speak again, I guess.
Thank you so much, JH. Love speaking with you. JH, thank you again for joining me on the show and sharing your story with our listeners. Make sure you check out our show notes at nobullshitvegan.com/157 to connect with JH. And thank you so much for tuning in.
Thanks for listening to the No Bullshit Vegan podcast at nobullshitvegan.com.